I want to show you all a quick demonstration of the difference between the three main types of service lifetimes in .NET. So you have scoped, transient, and singleton. So I want to show you the logs behind what's actually happening behind these three service lifetimes. So I've actually already started my application and I have added three main services. So I've added a test scoped service, and basically all that is doing is just pretty much just a shell of a service, but it's going to um, add in a test transient service with dependency injection, and then it's going to call a method on that service. But it's not doing anything else. It's just going to return. But the main thing that I want to point out in this is that for each of my services that I've made, I've added a console write line statement inside the constructor. So that will show you how many times the constructor is called um, when we're actually calling into the service. So I've done the same for singleton, and I've done the same for transient. And the reason why my scope service calls my transient service is because I need a way to show you that my transient service is being constructed every time that it's being called. Um, and then I've also added just a generic service that I'm calling service because I need to call my scope service elsewhere to show you that it's not constructed again. And I obviously can't do that inside my transient service because you can't, that doesn't work. So if I go back to my builder or my program.cs file, I've registered the services according to the name. So scoped is going to be my scope test service, transient is going to be my transient service, and singleton the same way. And then I've registered that calling service as a scope service as well. So I've also created an endpoint on my home controller that you've seen me use in other videos on this channel. But I'm calling the return on each of those services as well as my calling service that will then call the scope service. So there's a lot going on, but that's just the setup. I have to show you how it's set up so you can reproduce it if you want to. So I've already started the service, and if we look at the logs, you can see that way up at the top is where my singleton service gets constructed. And I've added a timestamp to show you that these were all constructed at the same time. Because if you look at dependency injection in .NET, dependency injection is a massive topic. It's a design pattern, but it's a way to decouple dependencies from classes. You don't basically it's trying to avoid calling it's trying to avoid using the new keyword basically inside of a class. And there's a number of reasons for this, but dependency injection basically creates this kind of, you can kind of think of it as like you have a root node, and then every time you add in a service, it kind of builds the composition of that. And you kind of can make a graph of that and map out like what's the root of the composition and then goes down from there. And what we're kind of going to be looking at here is some initial log statements upon building this application. So just to show you like why you may see duplicates, it has to do with what's happening behind the scenes in dependency injection prior to us calling this endpoint. So when we register those services, they're going to be constructed to then be able to be used kind of via reflection um, inside of the files that are actually going to be using them. And so because we needed to add in a dependency to these services, we should expect to see these log statements here. So again, that's just why you may see some duplicate log statements prior to us actually calling this. So let's go ahead and open Postman, and I'm going to I'm going to hit the send point here. So if I go ahead and hit send, you can see that we've generated three log statements way at the bottom here, two for transient and one for scoped. And that's important because transient, again, is going to be constructed each time the service is called, but scoped is only going to be constructed one time per request response lifecycle. So because we called our scope service, let's go into that. The scope service is then going to call the transient service. So that's construction 1 for transient, which is right here. Construction 2 for transient is going to be when we actually just call it from here. So that's another area where we're constructing it. And then the scope service is just going to be constructed one time because that's where we're calling it here. But we also called it again from calling service, but because it's registered as a scope service, it's not going to be constructed again because it already has been constructed. So that's the main difference. And the singleton service does not have a log because we've already constructed it when our application was built or we ran the application, right? So let's get rid of our breakpoint. Let's continue this and let's just send another message, or let's send another message on this endpoint. And you can see the same thing. We generated 3 more logs, 2 for transient, 1 for scoped. So hopefully that makes sense. I think log messages help to show you what's happening with service life cycles. It can be kind of a weird thing to think about, especially when it's something it's harder to visualize beyond just logs. So I would encourage you to kind of recreate something like this for yourself and just play around with what do the logs look like and what do different service registrations mean for my application. I'm not going to get into the applications of the service registrations on this video, but I just want to show you what the difference is between the 3 main types. So hopefully that was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.